I never thought a simple cardboard box could change my life. When I walked down that quiet alley late one night, my eyes fell on something that seemed out of place. It was a box, sitting there next to the dumpster, with the faintest sound of whimpering coming from inside. I hesitated for just a moment. Then curiosity got the better of me. My heart dropped as I carefully lifted the lid, and that's when I saw her. A small, trembling puppy, barely able to lift her head. Her fur was matted, and her body was covered in bruises, some of them still fresh. But what really hit me was the note beside her, scribbled in hurried, angry handwriting. Don't want her. I felt my breath catch in my throat. I wanted to scream. How could anyone leave something so helpless, so innocent, in a box like garbage? But the puppy's eyes, those big brown eyes, pierced right through me. She looked terrified, and yet, there was a flicker of something else in her gaze. A quiet plea, maybe for help, maybe for love. I couldn't leave her like this. I gently picked her up, wrapping her in my jacket, and whispered softly, "It's okay, baby. You're safe now." But deep inside, I couldn't shake the question. Why? Why had someone left her here? Why had they chosen to abandon her? As I carried her back to my apartment, my mind raced. I didn't know the answers yet, but I couldn't help but feel the weight of her story already pressing on my heart. The moment I walked through my door, I set the puppy gently on the couch, trying not to make any sudden movements. She was still trembling, not just from fear, but from something deeper. I could see the pain in her eyes, not just physical pain, but something emotional, something that made her look at the world with distrust. She was broken. And for the first time, I wasn't just angry at whoever had done this to her. I felt sorry for them. What kind of person could hurt an animal so badly, or worse, leave it like this? I knelt beside her and tried to check her wounds. They weren't too deep, but there were cuts along her legs and one under her belly. Whoever had abandoned her hadn't cared enough to take her to a vet. I felt the anger rise again, but this time it was mixed with a sadness I couldn't put into words. She needed care. She needed love. But most of all, she needed someone to believe in her. As I gently cleaned the puppy's wounds, I noticed her flinch every time I touched her. It wasn't just the pain from the injuries. It was as if she was scared of human touch, as if she had been hurt before, maybe even by someone she trusted. My heart broke a little more. The trust she had in humans was shattered, and yet, she hadn't given up. She hadn't shut down completely. That little spark in her eyes told me she was still willing to fight. She just needed someone to help. Her fight. I stayed with her all night, sitting quietly beside her, hoping that somehow my presence could offer her the comfort she needed. She didn't eat, she didn't move much, but every now and then, I'd see her look up at me, just for a second, before quickly turning away again. I didn't force her to do anything. I just let her be. She wasn't ready, but I wasn't going anywhere. I'd wait as long as it took. But as the days passed, the puppy, whom I named Luna, slowly started to show signs of progress. She began to eat a little, and when I spoke to her softly, I noticed her tail twitch ever so slightly. It wasn't much, but it was something. I felt a tiny spark of hope. But Luna wasn't just healing physically. She was starting to trust again, little by little. I'd sit with her every day, talking to her, feeding her, trying to show her that not all humans were bad. It was like a game of patience. The more time I spent with her, the more she seemed to realize I wasn't going to hurt her. She was learning to trust again. But just when I thought we were making progress, I noticed something that stopped me dead in my tracks. Luna was still scared, not just of humans, but of the world. There was something in her that made her wary of everything, even the smallest movements or sounds. It was as if she'd seen the worst side of life, and I was only a brief moment of light in her dark past. One night, after a long day, I sat with Luna on the couch. I was scratching behind her ears, and for the first time, she didn't flinch. Her eyes closed, and she let out a soft sigh, leaning into my touch. I was about to tell her she was safe, that everything would be okay, when I saw something strange, something that made my blood run cold. There, hidden beneath the couch cushions, was another piece of paper. I reached for it, and as I unfolded it, I realized it was another note. This one was different. It was written in a shaky hand, like someone who had no choice but to write it in haste. My hands trembled as I read the words. I couldn't do it. I couldn't keep her. But please, no, she was loved once. I'm sorry. I sat back, confused. What was going on? Had Luna been loved before? The note didn't make sense. If they loved her, why leave her behind like this? Why let her suffer? What had happened? And that was the moment I realized there was more to this story. More than I could have ever imagined. And I was going to find out the truth. The days after finding the second note were a blur of emotions. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'm sorry. She was loved once. The words echoed in my mind, but they didn't add up. How could someone who loved her leave her in a box like that, abandoned and hurt? The more I thought about it, the more the question gnawed at me. There had to be more to this story. I couldn't let it go. I had to know the truth about Luna's past. Every night, I stayed up late, scouring the city's lost pet reports, searching for any clue that might lead me to her former owners. I called every shelter, every vet clinic in town, hoping for a breakthrough. But no one recognized Luna. It was as if she had appeared out of nowhere. And that made the mystery even darker. One evening, after a particularly exhausting search, I was about to give up. My mind was overwhelmed, and Luna, as usual, was curled up beside me, quietly watching me with those soft, trusting eyes. That's when I noticed something that had never stood out before. There was a small tag on her collar, partially hidden by her fur. I gently pulled it out, inspecting it closely. It wasn't a typical pet tag, but rather an old, faded nameplate, scratched and worn. I could barely make out the name engraved on it, Ella. The realization hit me like a punch in the gut. Ella wasn't just the puppy I had found. She was someone else's family. Someone had named her, loved her, and now she was a broken, abandoned soul. I stood frozen, trying to process what this meant. Had they really given up on her? Could they have abandoned her so easily after everything? I had to know more. I couldn't just sit back and let Luna's story remain a mystery. I needed answers. The next day, I decided to take a different approach. I drove to the address listed on the note, the one that had been written in that desperate, shaky handwriting. It was a quiet, suburban neighborhood, far from the busy streets I was used to. As I drove past the rows of well-kept houses, a wave of unease washed over me. What if I was wrong? What if this wasn't the answer I was looking for? I parked in front of a small house with a white picket fence, its yard neatly manicured. I took a deep breath, my hands clutching the wheel tightly. This was it. I was about to uncover the truth. Slowly, I walked up to the front door and knocked. After a few moments, the door opened, revealing a woman in her late 30s. Her eyes were tired, but there was a warmth in them, too. She looked at me confused at first, as if she wasn't sure why I was there. "Can I help you?" she asked softly. I didn't waste any time. I found a puppy, a small dog, near a dumpster. She had a note that said, "Don't want her. And I think she used to belong to you." I paused, watching her carefully, hoping she wouldn't shut the door on me. "Her name is Luna." "Well, she used to be called Ella, I think." The woman's face went pale. Her eyes welled up with tears almost immediately. For a moment, she didn't say anything, just stared at me in shock, her hand trembling as she gripped the doorframe. "Ella," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You found her?" I nodded, feeling a mix of confusion and sorrow. "She was abandoned in a box. She's hurt, and I don't understand. Why? Why did you leave her?" The woman looked away, her face crumpling in sorrow. She stepped back, motioning for me to come inside. I hesitated for a moment, but followed her into the house, my heart racing. What was I about to hear? What was the real story? We sat down in the living room. She took a long, shuddering breath before she spoke again, her voice barely a whisper. "Didn't want to do it. I never wanted to let her go. But I couldn't keep her anymore. I couldn't take care of her." Her voice faltered as she looked away, as though the words themselves hurt to say. "I lost my job. My husband left me. I couldn't afford to feed her. She was everything to me, but I was drowning. I couldn't give her what she deserved. I couldn't watch her starve. I couldn't bear to see her suffer, too." I stared at her in disbelief. This wasn't what I had expected. This wasn't cruelty or neglect. It was desperation. The woman's pain was visible, etched into every line of her face. She wasn't heartless. She wasn't a villain. She was a mother, struggling to survive in a world that had given her no other option. "I didn't want to leave her like that," she continued, her voice cracking. "But I thought if someone found her, someone kind, maybe they could give her the life I couldn't. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I couldn't stop thinking about her, wondering if she was okay, if she was alive, if she was safe." I felt a lump form in my throat. All this time, I had been angry at the person who left Luna behind. But now, I understood. She didn't leave her because she didn't care. She left her because she loved her too much. She had given up her dog out of pure love, hoping someone else could provide a better life. "I'm so sorry," the woman whispered. "I thought I was saving her, but maybe I made the wrong choice." I didn't know what to say. Her grief was palpable, and I knew that no amount of comforting words would ever make her feel better. But I also knew one thing for sure, was loved. She had been loved, and now, she was safe. And I was going to make sure of that. Before I left, the woman handed me a small, worn photograph of Luna as a puppy, her eyes full of joy and innocence. "Please, take care of her," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "She deserves to be happy." I nodded, holding the photo close to my heart. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing. Luna's story wasn't over. She was going to heal. She was going to find happiness. And so was I. As I walked back to my car, I looked at the photograph one last time. Luna had been loved once. And now, it was my turn to give her the love she deserved. As I drove back home, the weight of everything I had learned settled on my shoulders. The woman had loved Luna, but life had torn them apart. And though I had my doubts at first, now I understood Luna's abandonment wasn't out of cruelty, but out of desperation. It had taken me a long time to piece the story together, but it felt like a chapter had finally closed. But as I walked through the door with Luna in my arms, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't done yet. There was something in Luna's eyes that I hadn't seen before, a quiet, lingering sadness that told me she wasn't completely at peace yet. She had been through so much, and despite her newfound safety, there was still something in her that was broken. I couldn't just fix her wounds and assume everything would be okay. I placed her down on the couch gently, and she immediately curled up into a tight ball, her little body trembling slightly. I sat next to her, trying not to overwhelm her with my presence. She still wasn't fully comfortable with me, but she was getting there. Slowly, over time, I had started to see her trust in me grow, piece by piece. But even now, she was a ghost of the dog she once was. There were times when she would flinch at sudden movements, her body tensing in fear, like she was bracing herself for something terrible to happen. I sat there for hours, watching her, thinking about everything she had gone through. I knew she wasn't just physically healing, she was carrying emotional scars too. I had no idea how long it would take for her to feel safe, truly safe. But I was willing to give her as much time as she needed. The next morning, I decided to take a different approach. Luna had been in the house for a few days now, and I thought it might be time for her to experience the world again at her own pace. I didn't want to rush her, but I knew she needed to step outside, to see that the world wasn't just a place of fear. So, I opened the door slowly, watching her as I did. At first, she didn't move, just staring at the open space, unsure. But then, after a long tense moment, she took a hesitant step forward. I held my breath as she walked into the yard, her head low, her body stiff with caution. She paused, sniffing the air, then slowly started to explore. It was a small victory, but I could see the transformation happening in real time. Each step she took was a step toward healing, a step toward trust. I kept my distance, sitting on the porch and watching her, letting her take the lead. Luna wandered around, her movements careful and tentative. She sniffed at the flowers, pawed at the grass, and even stretched out in the sun for a few moments. It was as though she was testing the world, testing her own limits, trying to figure out if she could be free again. And for the first time, I saw a glimmer of something more in her eyes. It was a spark of curiosity, of hope, of life returning to her. The days passed, and Luna continued to make slow but steady progress. She no longer flinched when I moved, no longer shrank away when I reached for her. She began to eat more, her body filling out, her energy slowly returning. I could tell she was still cautious, still haunted by the memories of what had happened to her, but she was learning to trust again, and every day, it felt like she was becoming more and more the dog she was meant to be. But just as things started to settle, something happened that I never saw coming. It was a Tuesday afternoon, and I had just returned from running errands. As I opened the door, I called for Luna, but there was no answer. I walked through the house, checking every room, thinking maybe she had just wandered off to her usual spot. But when I reached the back door, I froze. The door was wide open, and Luna was gone. Panic surged through me as I ran outside, calling her name. I looked frantically around the yard, my heart racing. I couldn't believe it. She had been here just an hour ago. She was safe. She was healing. Where could she have gone? I searched the neighborhood, knocking on doors, asking anyone if they had seen a small, brown puppy. No one had. The sun was starting to set, and the weight of the situation was beginning to sink in. I couldn't lose her now. I couldn't let her slip away again. Not after everything we had been through. Just as I was about to give up and head home, a familiar bark echoed down the street. My heart stopped. It was Luna. She was somewhere nearby. I followed the sound, running as fast as I could, my lungs burning. As I turned the corner, I saw her, a small brown figure running toward me, her tail wagging furiously. I knelt down as she barreled into me, covering my face with her kisses. I laughed through the tears, holding her tightly. "Where did you go, baby?" I whispered, hugging her close. She was panting, but her eyes were full of excitement, full of joy. She wasn't scared. She wasn't lost. She had just needed a moment of freedom, of space. And in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. Luna wasn't just healing physically or emotionally. She was rediscovering who she was. She was no longer the abandoned puppy in the box. She was becoming the dog she was meant to be, strong, resilient, and full of life. It wasn't going to be an easy journey. But I knew now, without a doubt, that Luna had a future. And I would be there for every step of it. Together, we would both find a new beginning. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of small, beautiful moments that made my heart swell with pride. Luna, the once terrified puppy, who had been left in a box with nothing but a note, was slowly but surely transforming into a joyful, confident dog. Every day, there was progress. Her tail wagged a little harder. Her eyes sparkled a little brighter. The trust that had taken so long to build was finally solidifying. And I couldn't help but feel that we were healing together. I took Luna on walks every day, letting her explore the world at her own pace. At first, she stuck to the familiar paths in the neighborhood, hesitant to stray too far. But soon, she started venturing into new places. The park, the beach, the trails in the woods. I watched with awe as she ran freely, her ears flying in the wind, her body full of life and energy. She was rediscovering what it meant to be a dog, to be free, to be happy. But even as Luna was blossoming, I couldn't forget the past. I kept thinking about that second note, the one that had said, "I'm sorry, and she was loved once." It lingered in my mind, a constant reminder of the life she had before she came into mine. The woman who had left Luna in the box had done so out of love, but it still didn't sit right with me. How could someone who loved her so much just let her go? Was there something more I wasn't seeing? I had to find answers. One evening, after Luna had fallen asleep, I sat down at my desk. Pulling out the photograph the woman had given me, I stared at it for a long time, studying the image of Luna as a puppy, happy and carefree. There had to be a story behind that photo, a story that would make everything make sense. I opened my laptop and started digging. I reached out to local animal organizations, hoping to find a clue, a lead. Hours passed as I scoured the internet, making phone calls, sending emails. But it wasn't until late that night, when I had almost given up, that I got a message that made my heart skip a beat. It was from a woman named Sophie, a social worker who had worked with Luna's previous family. Sophie explained that Luna had been with them since she was a pup, but things had taken a turn when the family went through a difficult period. The husband had lost his job, and the wife's health had deteriorated. They couldn't afford to keep Luna, and they couldn't bear to see her suffer. So, they made the hardest decision of their lives, something they regretted every day. Sophie had been the one to help them rehome Luna. But by the time she got involved, it was already too late. The family had lost everything, and in their desperation, they had left Luna behind. Sophie's message was filled with guilt. She had never been able to track down the family to let them know Luna was safe, and she couldn't help but wonder if they ever thought about her. The message hit me harder than I expected. The woman who had left Luna in that box hadn't just abandoned her out of cruelty. She had made a heartbreaking decision, one that she had thought would give Luna a better life. And now, years later, she carried the weight of that decision with her, wondering if it had been the right thing to do. I felt a rush of emotion, sadness, anger, and a deep sense of empathy for Luna's previous family. I couldn't change the past, but I could make sure that Luna had a future full of love and happiness. I picked up Luna, who had woken up and was now nuzzling my hand, sensing that something had shifted. I held her close, kissing the top of her head. "You're safe now," I whispered. "You're loved, and you will never have to feel alone again." As I sat there, holding her, I made a promise to myself. Luna's story wasn't just about survival, it was about second chances. It was about the power of love to heal, to restore, and to rebuild what had been broken. Luna had been through so much, but in the end, she had found her home, and so had I. The next morning, I woke up with a new sense of purpose. Luna was my family now, and together, we were building a life full of joy and new memories. We would keep exploring, keep growing, and keep healing. And wherever the road led, I knew one thing for sure: Luna had finally found her forever home. As we sat on the porch that morning, watching the sun rise over the horizon, I realized that we were both exactly where we were meant to be. And that, in itself, was a miracle.